Well, hello everyone. It's great to see everyone here. My name is Rebecca Fannin, and I'm the founder and editor of Silicon Dragon. Silicon Dragon, this is our third year in London. We were here 2 years ago at Campus London. Thank you. And we are connecting global technology hotspots, and that means Silicon Valley, New York, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, Sydney, Bangalore. We are in all of those places holding events. And of course we wouldn't overlook London by any means, particularly now that London has really come up as a tech city. I know there's been delegations visiting Southeast Asia, Singapore, and Malaysia. There was another delegation visiting New York City recently. So I know that there's a lot of energy being put behind startups and innovation here in London. So we're here to capture some of that spirit, some of that energy, and to help you see the light going to Asia as well. Because China is really on the rise, as everyone knows. It's the world's second largest venture capital market, and a very innovative market as well. I spend a lot of time in China as a journalist writing about what's going on in China. And India is clearly on the rise too. I think it had lagged behind China by about 5 years, but is catching up now, and we're going to see a lot of activity. I think I just saw today that something about Google might be buying InMobi. InMobi is a startup that I wrote about, a mobile ad marketing startup that I wrote about from Bangalore about 5 years ago, and covered in 2 of my books. So it's great to see some of the startups that we highlight along the way really making it. So I'd like to thank our sponsors for this event. We can't do this event on our own, obviously, so I'd like to thank Google Campus for providing the venue. I'd like to thank Sidley Austin for providing support all along and also participation with the event. And I would like to thank UKTI, London and Partners, London Stock Exchange, Forbes, where I write a weekly column, Tech City News, CXO Asia Pacific, China-Britain Business Council, and last but not least, the China-Britain Business Fusion. So a lot of the representatives are here today, and I hope that you'll get to mingle and meet with everyone. So let me kick this off with asking Alexander Trewby to come to the stage. And I first met Alexander in Hong Kong, what was it, 2 years ago?
Maybe longer.
Maybe longer than that, it seems longer, right? And he was doing a startup based in Hong Kong, and it's been a really interesting entrepreneurial career for him since then, and we'll get to hear more about that journey. So Alexander, why don't you come up here? I think some people here in the audience know that they were acquired by Google. So thank you. Thank you, Alexander.
You sit down.
Well, good. So as I said, I first met Alexander a little bit more than 2 years ago in Hong Kong when he was doing a startup on mobile security. I was thinking about his startup today when I was hearing the news about Hillary Clinton and how she didn't really want to use 2 different devices to check her email.
That was your saying.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason that she didn't use the State Department email, is because she didn't want to use 2 devices. So your company's Divide, your startup Divide, was a solution for that problem, where people can use their mobile device for both business and for private stuff, family stuff. And so, it just really rang true when I hear Hillary Clinton using this as a reason.
It wasn't just not the first politician that would have had some benefit from it. There was Elliot Spitzer. Right?
Yes, sure.
So he, of course, there were some sort of sexy texts on his phone that had covered, and he was sending things. So again, what Divide did was essentially we took a phone, we split it into 2, so you had your work life and your personal life on one device. And I think he could benefit from that.
Yeah.
That as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it'll be interesting to see how the Hillary Clinton thing all shakes out. But I thought that was really interesting, a reason for her keeping her emails as private. So anyhow, tell us about what has happened with Divide? You're no longer called Divide, right, for one thing. Tell us about this journey as an entrepreneur. I mean, could you have ever imagined this back when you were working at an investment bank, that your startup would end up being acquired by Google?
I think that the majority of startups commence with that ambition. We had absolutely no comprehension that we actually realised that particular dream. But it has been, we've been extremely fortunate, a lot of luck along the way. And actually here, you saw earlier, Dave, my co-founder, he lives in Hong Kong, is around, so I'm going to keep an eye on at the back, and because he's got to keep me honest, so I can't tell any lies in front of you because he knows the truth. But it was incredible. We started in 2010. There were 3 of us, Andrew, David, and I. We all worked at Morgan Stanley together. And as something I often say, but Goldman Sachs is a preeminent investment bank, and Morgan Stanley is the software house masquerading as an investment bank, in the sense that it IPO'd Netscape, Apple, Google, first bank to algo trade, a lot of technology, obviously big data in these companies. So actually a destination for an engineer, there is some fun to be had. So we were all there working on mobile engineering back in the early 2000s. We were hacking away at BlackBerries, trying to get them to do the things that we wanted. And we couldn't get at the operating system. Along comes Android, the first open source operating system, and we were able to start playing with it. We saw people using their iPhones and not wanting to use their BlackBerries. And there was definitely an opportunity for us to prevent pocket erosion and situations that Hillary finds herself in, of combining that technology on one device, and therefore adding the security that iPhones and Android devices need. I think invariably when it comes to a new platform, security is a sort of version 2 feature.
Right. So how did it work? You were in London, you had another founder in New York, and then Dave in Hong Kong. I mean, how did this work with this kind of a hybrid startup team of really?
It did work, and I would say so. We founded in January 2010. We exited in May, June of last year. And last month, Andrew, David, and I all went on a sort of family skiing holiday together. We brought our families along, and I think that that founding team is sort of one of the core ingredients, obviously, of a startup.
You've stayed together the
I
whole
think the fact that we're
time.
not sick to death of each other is, I think, it has been, in hindsight, extremely important.
And are you still together today after
Dave's
Google
here.
Acquisition?
I'll be going out to dinner with him later, and Andrew, I bored him to death for an hour on the phone this morning. He's in California right now. We were 3 founders on 3 continents, which is a ludicrous thing to do. Another ludicrous thing to do is that actually the company was originally called Enterprise, because it was Enterprise Android. And whatever you do when you name your company, don't box yourself into a corner from a product perspective. And we had an iPhone product, and we weren't necessarily going to stay in Enterprise, so it was a silly thing to do. And then Divide was our name change. But 3 founders, 3 continents. All at Morgan Stanley, we're very used to offshoring engineers. We are 3 engineers, but we knew we had to build an engineering team. We were either going to offshore that to India or Canada or Eastern Europe. But both Andrew and David are of Chinese descent. And Andrew was born in Hong Kong, but lived in New York. David was born in China, lived in California, but his wife was from Hong Kong, so he had just moved back there. I have long been a fan of China. I have a passion for politics, and to me the most interesting difficulty of our time is China. And so we thought, well, hold on, let's go and research what the engineering talent is like in Hong Kong. And we had very low expectations, in the sense that we thought that technical capability wouldn't be quite what it was in the Valley. We thought that language would be a challenge. And then we thought, from a sort of business cultural perspective, of wanting to work at a Western startup would be a problem. This is 2009, 2010, so I think you would bear in mind that this is our concern then. Wrong. We were amazed at the talent. that was applying to work in the company. Language, no problem in Hong Kong. They were also being taught in English at school. The schools rank extremely highly in a sort of global positioning, and it proved extremely successful. I think one of the sort of top 3 or 5 decisions we made as a company was basing our engineers in Hong Kong. We grew to the end to be 70 people. We had 30 engineers in Hong Kong, and it became very much part of our culture.
Right.
And post-acquisition, Google and China, obviously doing a funky dance. Those engineers are actually in London. They've just moved and been relocated to London, which is where they all now are. So a lot of very interesting cultural dynamics and considerations about how to move 30, 20-something engineers from Hong Kong to London, how to work with just elements of putting one's head down on one's keyboard midway through the day and going to sleep, which we obviously actively encourage because we understand the concept of power nap, but in Western offices it's not something that one necessarily sees too often. And the other component was that of disposable income. These kids, these guys who lived at home and saved a significant portion of their income, and then moving them to London, increasing their salary and saying, well, but you're going to have to pay for rent and you're going to commute into the office, this is something they've gotten used to, and this is why we increase the salary, and that has been an interesting cultural journey as well. But back to the company, 2010, we launched our first product in China, in Beijing, through Dell. We were on board some Dell tablets, and then partnered with network operators and device manufacturers, sold into large enterprises, and very much took advantage of the trend that was bring your own device.
Do you think because you had this Hong Kong connection and the China connection that you were able to scale the business more rapidly?
Definitely. So I don't really, Dave was the CTO, he's still not here, thankfully. And he will say otherwise. He'll say that actually, no, we've got a tough time recruiting engineers. But I think compared to my peers in London and in the Valley, it was an absolute breeze. Very much easier to do. So there were challenges originally of working for a Western style startup. This is risky. Perhaps one's parents would rather they worked for a blue chip, safe, larger organization. And that was something that we had to work with them on. And invariably what we would say is come on board, do an internship with us for a period of time, then, and in doing so they would invariably just stay with us. But that was tricky, and actually then when it came to the acquisition, it was somewhat reversed in the sense that we had to, one of the requirements of the acquisition was to get 90-something% of the employees to agree to come on board with Google and also to move continents.
Yeah, but didn't they have an equity stake in the company?
They did, and again, that was another cultural dynamic. So let me address that one in a moment. But we thought this was going to be a challenge. Why would they want to come and live in London? And so would we be able to get everyone over the line? And so what we thought we should do is actually give the offer letters to their parents, who I think would say, yes, they're trebling their salary, they are working for a large corporation, and therefore not give it to the employees. And rather, it was all very patronising. But then they were very excited to work with Google first of all, and then London, I think, thereafter. As it relates to stock options, now this has changed, but certainly in 2010, we were fortunate enough to be the largest Series A company in Hong Kong at the time, and you've just seen what's happened in the last 5 years there with the number of little workspaces, and it's definitely a homebrew computer club like vibe happening there. But we did offer them stock options to start with, and they regarded it as a ruse, as a con, And
they prefer cash,
they wanted
right?
cash. They wanted hard, cold cash, and they're sort of coming from investment banking. We were very used to cash bonuses at the end of every period, and so as hard as we tried, we gave them cash, and then over time, as more startups and culture changed, then we managed to convince them in their best interest to take equity.
So why did the engineering team need to move to London? Why couldn't they just stay in Hong Kong?
So a number of reasons. The main one is because we all work in the Android team, and the Android team is centered in both Mountain View and in London. And the idea of having a sort of disparate workforce in that particular product team is not something that they want, and so they had to move to either London or Mountain View. As it happens, the enterprise Android team always has been based in London. It's 90% of the reason. 10% of the reason is because of the challenges with China.
Oh, I see.
And Google, I should imagine.
Yeah,
but the predominant
even
one,
from Hong Kong.
Well, I mean, obviously, Google does have offices all over China and in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's rather fun because having worked at an investment bank and being an engineer, you're very much a second-class citizen. You're a waiter in a restaurant when a banker says jump. It's how high. At Google, the engineers are at the top of the food chain, which is a refreshing change. And they want in the offices that Google has in Hong Kong, Beijing, there aren't many, if any, certainly in Hong Kong, engineers. And so the engineers have to be together. And so there are no exceptions made.
Is taking the acquisition offer from Google, in hindsight, is it a good move?
Absolutely, 100%, yes.
Yeah?
It was a new space, BYOD, and
Bring your own device.
Bring your own device. And so what we saw happening was, you have new companies being created, the larger enterprise players, the IBMs and the VMwares and Oracles and of this world, stay back on the sidelines. They wait until one of these companies bubbles up and shows promise, and they go out and acquire them. It's a sort of age-old life cycle. And so when that first acquisition is made, it's rather like musical chairs. The music has stopped, and you've got to go and find a seat. And music had stopped with an acquisition of a company called AirWatch by VMware for $1.x billion. And we had to find our seat. So had we not accepted that acquisition, I think it would have been somewhat challenging. Now, that said, we were still nervous about conveying the news of this to our employees, and I spoke about this before at events, but it was not too dissimilar to holding or hosting a drinks party, or when you host it, and there's that moment before the start, you think, is anyone going to turn up? I mean, I don't know if you had this when you were sort of staying out there this afternoon, wondering, is actually anyone going to turn up to this event? It's sort of, I think it's a perfectly normal thing to do. And so we were nervous about telling our employees, hey, we have, the board and the management have agreed to be acquired by Google. We didn't know if they were going to say, what, you sold out, or not Google, anyone else. But we were probably nervous. They were all extremely happy about that. It is, I have to say, I've worked with 50,000 people at Google, almost standing there 50,000 people. I've worked in a large enterprise before. If you've had the pleasure of going around the Google office, you see a lot of the paraphernalia that Google lost. But underneath that, it is still a large enterprise of 50,000 people. They, I think, do earn the reputation they have as being an employer of choice. They are thoroughly encouraging. I think when you're acquired by a company, you want two things to happen. You want everyone to be employed, and you want the product to continue to see the light of day. 30 engineers in Hong Kong, Google, you would probably speculate that they would shut it down. No need, thanks for the engineers, we don't need them. But everyone's employed. As it relates to the product Single Line today, we actually launched Android for Work last week. Everyone, turn around, please. That is David Zhu, the co-founder and CTO of Divide, who's actually here from Hong Kong and can speak far more knowledgeably than I about all of this. You do want to see the products we like today. It launched last week, and I think that's be careful what you wish for, because it meant that we weren't able to put our feet up post-acquisition. We have actually continued to work.
Working harder than before as a startup?
Absolutely not. That's not the case. Less stress. I think hours.
Less stress.
Just less risk.
Less risk. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Any burning question from the audience for Alexander, or for David in the back, who's the co-founder? Okay. Well, if not, let's give Alexander a round of applause. Thank you.